everyone. Welcome to the College of Law webinar on today. I'm just going to fill in a bit of time whilst we welcome everyone to join the webinar. My name's Jackie Stephan. I'm the Relationship Manager at the College of Law, and we've been hosting one or two webinars a month, really with the idea of supporting law students, PLT students through this COVID-19 period, but generally giving you skills and techniques to take for now, but also in your future career. So we certainly hope you've been enjoying this webinar series we've put together. Welcome aboard, everyone. As I said, I'm Jackie Stephan. I'm going to sit in the background through most of this and have the luxury of listening to Andrea. So I've got an easy job today, by far. So I'll just introduce Andrea Phillips for everyone. Andrea is an adjunct lecturer here at the college. She's also a mindfulness tutor at Monash Uni, amongst other amazing things that she does. And she also has degrees in both psychology and law. So Andrea is going to take us through the webinar today, and I'll hand over to Andrea.
Great. So welcome today to everybody as we explore ways to manage your daily life right now. As Jackie said, I've been very lucky to have the combination of law and psychology, and I'm very happy to answer questions about that at the end if that's helpful for people as well if they're thinking about careers. I've been really lucky. I've been able to work as a lawyer in Melbourne. I also had the pleasure of working in London and Brussels, and I've come back now to Melbourne, and I've been working using a mix of my law and my psychology. I've got a particular interest in student wellbeing, so I really want to do things today that can help you, and I'm really happy to answer questions at the end. If anyone has any questions, please put them on the Q&A, and I'll endeavour to answer anything that you like, or if you want to, you can email us at the College of Law through Jackie, and I will get back to you privately if you prefer. Okay, so let me just start sharing my screen with you. Okay. As you can probably tell, guys, I'm not very keen on technology, but there we go. All right, so there's a lot of anxiety around COVID-19 at the moment. It's left a lot of us feeling unsettled and uncertain. And that means we all need a little extra support. Now, anxiety can manifest in lots of different ways. One of the examples we saw really clearly was the people doing the panic buying at the supermarket. So what can we do to help ourselves right here and now? So the research is very clear that anxiety is highly contagious. But the good news is that so is calm. And this session, it takes an evidence-based approach with practical tools and techniques to help you manage uncertainty, reduce your anxiety, and try and help you stay connected. We're going to look at a whole lot of different areas. We're going to look at mindfulness, using social media, lifestyle tips, and sleep, how to get a good night's sleep. So one of the ways that you can approach this situation is doing what we call formal mindfulness meditation. Now, you know, mindfulness and meditation, they have had some negative press over the years, but I want you to keep an open mind in relation to this and just, you know, think about how it might be beneficial at this time. It doesn't require any extra expenditure. or any extra equipment, and it provides us with a means of cultivating greater calm and a more objective awareness of our own emotional landscape and the emotions of others. There is a lot of evidence-based research on how it helps people with decreasing stress, decreasing anxiety, and helping with depression. And even how it helps with improving study and productivity, which can be really important for you as students at the moment. So using mindfulness, it gives you more choice in how you respond to challenges and choose where to place your attention. It won't make this current situation go away, but mindfulness may be helpful to stay present and calmer. So if we talk about the formal mindfulness, you may find it helpful to start or end your day with a short meditation. And we'll try one together at the end of this session. Then there's this idea of informal mindfulness. So it's going about your daily activities in a more mindful way. So it's about being mindful when you brush your teeth. When you're brushing your teeth, think about brushing your teeth. When you're washing the dishes, think about washing the dishes. You know, feel how hot the water is, feel if it's soapy, notice if the dishes are clean. Another way you can think about informal mindfulness is talking to your friends and really listening. And this is really important at the moment. So this idea of what I call mindfulness in disguise can even help us create healthy habits. So even washing your hands mindfully and taking care not to touch your face can be mindfulness. Okay, so what's our goal today? The goal is not that we should all be feeling good all the time, but that we should get better at making life manageable and identifying negative emotions and negative thinking. And this will ultimately improve our well-being and we will be calmer. So, how do we do this? And how does mindfulness help? Well, at the moment, there's a lot of uncertainty, and our brain does not like uncertainty. Our brain likes to feel in control. So at the moment, it fills the gaps, the uncertainty, but research says it most often does this with negative thinking in an attempt to regain control. And unfortunately, it will most often predict the very worst case scenario. Further, our brain has something called a negativity bias, which means that on average, we notice 7 times more negative comments or emotions to 1 positive, pleasant comment or emotion. That's on average 7 to 1. That's why you remember insults, but you don't always focus on compliments. Now, this makes sense in an evolutionary way. It has a survival advantage as we pass on these kind of wary genes, so that if others are looking worried or fearful, we worry. If others are running away from, the saber-toothed tiger, we run too, even if we haven't seen it. And this has helped us survive. We also know that what we constantly think about gets hardwired into our brain. So if all you're thinking about is negativity and fear, that's how we see the world. And then you find more examples of it. And this reinforces the idea in our brain, and so on and so on. So I'm just asking you to be aware of this psychological tendency, and being mindful can help with this. So I'm going to read you a little story about this phenomenon about fright or flight or freeze. So it's something that happens when we activate the stress response. So this is an old story about a man walking down a bush track. And on the track, about 10 metres ahead, he sees something. It looks dark. It's about 2 metres long and it's coiled up. Of course, he thinks it's a snake. And he starts shaking in fear that the snake will sense his presence and make a lunge at him. Furthermore, there are probably other snakes in the vicinity. He becomes paralysed with fear and he can't move. Well, luckily for him, along behind him comes the park ranger who saw the man and asked why he was so anxious. The man told the ranger about the snake, and the ranger said, well, we had better investigate. Fortunately, he had a torch, so he shone the torch on the snake. And shedding a little more light on the object, it was immediately apparent that the snake was not there. It was merely a rope which the man had mistaken for a snake. The snake never actually existed except in the imagination of the man. So what this story illustrates is a disorder of perception, perceiving something that isn't actually there. Now, under certain circumstances, a fight or flight or freeze response can be quite appropriate and healthy. For example, when we are in the presence of an actual snake. But often, when we aren't, and we aren't mindful, we perceive a world full of snakes which aren't actually there. And we start doing things like catastrophizing about a future that hasn't happened or what may have occurred in the past. Imaginary stresses, though, can't actually harm us. If, for example, you were to imagine right now a real tiger, you might notice that it doesn't actually activate your fight or flight or freeze response. Now, why is this? It's because you're able to see an imaginary tiger for what it is. It's just your imagination. You know an imaginary tiger can't eat you, so you're not afraid of it. But here's the thing. Do we perceive things that aren't even there? And do we remember that when we are getting anxious over things that may or may not happen, especially in the middle of the night? So the important tools you have now are essentially the torch. So that's your awareness or your mindfulness, which is getting you to illuminate what is actually in front of you right now. And then you've also got the power to investigate, which helps us to discern imagination from reality. That is, imagine threats versus real ones. So, how does mindfulness sit in here with this? If we perceive stresses that aren't there or focus only on negative worries, this becomes our reality. And we repeatedly activate the flight or fight or freeze response. So especially now, we need to keep things in perspective. We need to be proactive about this because at the moment, this stress button is being pushed over and over again. It's really important to remind yourself that this is a temporary period of isolation. It's to slow down the spread of the virus. And using this thinking part of your brain and being mindful, don't default to that caveman reptilian part of your brain, which is about fright and flight and freeze. That's what the panic buying was all about. We can also remember the research that says optimism can be learned and developed. So we can note things like this. We are flattening the curve. We have amazing scientists that are looking into creating a vaccine. And we can look at history to see examples of how we got through things like this in the past. Now, one of our big enemies or friends, depending on how you look at it at the moment, is social media and news headlines. So what I want you to think about is how you can set yourself up to have a good perception of events. What you want to do is you want to have good quality sources of information that are reliable and factual. That may not be social media or news media. It might be government and health authority websites. That way, you can have a good perception based more on fact than sensationalism. Because news media is about dramatic and traumatic headlines. That's how they hook our attention. And every media source at the moment is competing to try and hijack your attention. Now, we talked about the negativity bias. Well, you know what? The news people, they know about this too. And what they put out is stuff that can become quite addictive. And, you start feeling, I need to know the statistics. But do you need to know the statistics every hour? Also, some of us are, a bit bored and we have more time on our hands at home. So some of us are able to watch TV all day rather than going to the gym, which is closed. And this can also feed into this endless loop of negativity. So what I want you to think about is countering the negative news. So you can do this. You can watch comedy shows, or you can watch good news stories to balance the negativity. There are other things you could do. You could set a timer on how long it is you're going to listen to the news. Is it for 1 hour in the morning, not hour by hour each day, or whatever else works for you. You may find it helpful to take some of the apps off your phone if this helps. And I'm going to keep going on about social media and news because it really is something that's really important for you to be thinking about. Okay. Another thing you can think about is this idea of letting go, or what we call non-attachment. So like with the social media, I want you to think about what it is that you can control, and control what you can, and then let the other stuff go. So at the moment, many people are experiencing fear and negative thoughts and rumination and uncertainty. And, for a lot of us, any sense of control we may have felt we had has popped. And that's regarding our health, our jobs, and our home life. I'd like to just touch on our home life because for many of us, home life is looking really different at the moment. You might be at home all on your own and experiencing a sense of loneliness, or you might not be with your family. You might be in a very busy share house where people aren't normally home all the time, but they are. Or you might be in a house and people are homeschooling. All these different scenarios are possible right now, and many more. And I understand it would be really difficult too if you were a student from overseas and you couldn't be with your family. So what I'm trying to encourage you to do is step back from any of these stresses that are happening right now in your home and in your home life, and see if you can have a sense of letting certain things go if you can, not being a perfectionist, and a general sense of non-attachment. So I thought I'd read you another little story which illustrates how we can put things down or let go. So there's a story, a Zen story. There's a senior monk, and he and a junior monk are travelling together, And at one point, they come to a river with a very strong current. And as the monks were preparing to cross the river, they saw a young woman also attempting to cross. And she was in traditional dress. And the young woman asked if they could help her cross to the other side. The two monks glanced at one another because they had taken a vow not to touch a woman. Then, without a word, the older monk picked up the woman, carried her across the river, placed her gently on the other side, and carried on his journey. Well, the younger monk couldn't believe what had happened. After rejoining his companion, he was speechless, and an hour passed without a word between them. 2 more hours passed, then 3. And finally, the younger monk could contain himself no longer, and he blurted out, "As monks, we're not permitted to touch a woman. How could you then carry that woman on your shoulders?" The older monk looked at him very calmly and replied, "I set her down on the other side of the river. Why are you still carrying her?" Now, I tell you this simple Zen story because I think it has a really beautiful message about living in the present moment. You know, how often do we carry around past hurts and hold on to resentments when the only person we are really hurting is ourselves? You know, we all go through times in life when other people say things or behave in ways that are hurtful towards us. And this may be happening in your home life or in other areas of your experience at the moment. And it's hurtful to us. We can choose to ruminate over these things, but it will ultimately weigh us down and sap our energy. Instead, we can choose to let go of what doesn't serve us anymore and concentrate on the present moment. And until we find that level of peace and happiness in our present lives, it's going to be hard to feel really content. So another thing we can think about is this idea of acceptance. So regardless of what we'd like things to be at the moment, things are as they are now. If you add non-acceptance of these things, you only add to your stress. It is what it is, and an accepting attitude can be more empowering, and it can give us the energy to be involved in what we can and can't control. You know, I'm going to ask you to accept the emotion of grief, and it is grief that we're all feeling at the moment, and it's lots of other things. It's sadness, and it's frustration, and it's loss about what's happened. But we can practice acceptance and self-compassion, and if we do, we allow these feelings and reactions to just come up and create room for acceptance of them. What I don't want you to do is be a harsh critic of yourself. We're all doing the best we can in these times. So I want you to think about your inner critic, that voice inside you that says, I should be doing this or I should be doing that. I want you to watch out for that and just accept that we're all doing the best we can at the moment. And that's this mindfulness idea I keep coming back to about staying in the present. So, you know, mindfulness is about that. It's trying to be in the present. It's not thinking about what ifs, what if this happens, what if that happens. It's thinking about what is. Am I okay right now? And so if you can ask yourself that question and say, yes, I'm okay right now, keep asking yourself that and checking in and step your way, step by step through the day in that way. And then start again in the same way the next day. Now, all of us are still going to have to run this marathon, but we can all do it one step at a time. Being present, we don't have to stress about our inability to focus or to plan. You can just ask yourself, do I feel safe now? I want you to realise that it might be difficult for some of you to concentrate at this difficult time. And for some people, this is their freeze response. This is what the freeze response might be doing for you. So in a study context, if you're worrying about your exams in the future, it makes it hard to study now for what's needed to pass this particular part of the course. So what I want you to try and do is not to fill your mind with future fears and anxieties, but stay present on the assignment or the task now. I'm going to talk a lot about this because I think this is really important. It's this idea of being compassionate to ourselves, but also compassionate to others. And I want everybody to drop the perfectionism. If we can let care and kindness be contagious, if you can do this, you will experience this whole event differently. I'd like you to also think about who's there for you. Who are your important relationships? And maintain those important relationships. Ask yourself the question, who can I rely on for support now? Make a list of it and check in with them as often as you need. Or, set up a support group with them. You can do this online or by ringing them, whatever it is. There's also a huge body of research about contributing to the well-being of others. Because what this does, it helps shift attention from ourselves onto what we can do for others. This helps us connect and gain a greater sense of agency. Even if you're only doing it in a very small way, it will still have beneficial effects. So, support a local business. Check in on an elderly neighbour or friend. This is the silver lining of what's happening at the moment, this idea of community compassion. And it's really evident at the moment. It's the good thing that's coming out of this. So if you can focus on that, that's going to be much better for your mental health than focusing on the negative. Now, one way that you can be compassionate to ourselves is this sort of best friend test. You treat yourself like you would your best friend. In essence, we give ourselves the same kindness and care we would offer a good friend if they were struggling. You wouldn't berate your good friend for feeling anxious. You'd actually offer them sympathy and support. So that's what I'm asking you to do for yourselves now. Also, remember, we are much more resilient than we think. Don't underestimate yourselves. Another helpful thing to do is don't compare. Stick to the facts. Don't compare yourself with others. Comparison is the engine of self-doubt. There's a meme going around at the moment that basically says that if you don't come out of quarantine with new skills, you lack discipline. So here's the thing, even in isolation during a global pandemic, we are expected to be pushing ourselves. Well, this is just wrong. It is fine to do what you can, and that's enough. There's nothing wrong if you are learning and being super productive, but now is really a time for self-compassion and not pressure to achieve. I'm going to say it again. Watch out for your social media. Cull negative or triggering accounts. This is about, again, controlling what you can. Or put a limit on your social media. Because even though on some level we know images are curated that appear on social media, there is really strong evidence that social media can affect you negatively. One way that you can help yourself with this is, I find helpful, is you can set an intention about what you're going to do on social media before you start. So, is it that I'm just checking in on friends? Is it that I want to have a look at some good news stories? Whatever it is. Follow accounts that make you feel good. Again, curate your media. And finally, remind yourself you are doing the best you can under the circumstances. So please don't compare. So I came up with a really long list of lifestyle tips to help ease anxiety, because anxiety can actually alter how we feel and think, and it can leave us feeling trapped and robbed of energy and motivation. But it's now really a time when we should be looking after ourselves mentally, physically, and socially. So I've just made a little list in case that is helpful for you. I want you to think about moderate exercise that you enjoy and that you find relaxing. We know that exercise increases your serotonin levels, which is a hormone that contributes to general happiness. We know that even gentle exercise, such as breathing exercises or yoga, can be beneficial. Gardening can be exercise, or walk around the block. We know exercise lifts our mood, it eases stress and mental fatigue, it boosts energy and motivation, and increases sleep quality. Also, I want you to think about a healthy diet. So if you're wondering what to eat, have small protein-based snacks. Have a bottle of water handy, because dehydration can make you feel irritable and tired. I also encourage you to get out of the house into fresh air. It's well known that sunshine lifts our mood and boosts our vitamin D, and it has the added bonus of getting us off our screens. I also want you to think about that list, stay connected. We are essentially herd animals. We like being part of a group. So for some people, this is a really hard time at the moment. For some people, it's helpful to develop rituals so that they have some sense of structure and routine. So it might be we always have an evening meal together, or we always have a daily chat or a daily walk. So for some people, establishing a routine can be really helpful. When things are unpredictable, it can add to your stress. So if you have a routine, it might be this: I get up at this time, I get dressed. You can even use a calendar and schedule things for your whole day or for a whole week with, what time you get up, what time you exercise, what time you start work. If that's helpful for you, try that. If you are working from home, try really hard to establish a work-life balance. Have regular breaks, get up from that computer screen and do some stretching. Have a set, dedicated workspace. That's the space where work happens. And if possible, again, get off the screens when you can. I'm going to keep saying it again, but avoid news and social media if you find it distressing. Use your screen time discerningly. Another thing that people find really helpful is to take time for yourself. Do something for yourself each day and set a time for it. You can put that in your daily calendar if that's helpful. Something you really like doing for yourself. My list goes on of practical things to do now if anxiety is getting the better of you. in essence, they are these mindfulness in disguise things. So, you know, if you are feeling that you've got a sense of anxiety, take 3 deep breaths. Take a shower, take a hot shower, take a cold shower. Eat a healthy breakfast in the morning. If you're lucky enough to be in isolation with a pet, pat your pet. Use essential oils, splash cold water on your face, have a cup of tea, do it mindfully, focus on the process of making it, focus on the process of enjoying it and drinking it. There are lots of meditations that you can do from one of the free apps, and I've got a list at the end with some recommendations on that. But, you know, there are other things. You can, you know, if knitting is your thing, knitting is mindfulness in disguise. There's a lot of evidence about being grateful. You know, think of 3 things that you're grateful for right now. Again, this idea of planning something just for you deliberately every day. Call a loved one. Stretch. Keep a plant in your workspace. There's a lot of evidence that says that's really good for you, particularly with screens. Do some cooking. Do some gardening. The list really is as endless and unique as it is to you. So please, if any of these are helpful, but maybe make your own list. Think about what would work for you. So we're going to have a little think about sleep now. So the importance of sleep. A lot of people are struggling to sleep at the moment, or the other thing that I've been hearing is that people are having really crazy dreams. So part of this is that people are worrying about the coronavirus, and they're worrying about jobs, and they're worrying about finance. And this might be keeping you up at night or waking you up at night. 3 a.m. is that really crucial time when people seem to wake up and find it hard to get back to sleep. And the cruel thing is that sleep is really crucial to our mental health and our physical health. And also, it's really important in relation to resistance. Good sleep habits boost our immunity. So I want you to think about how we can improve our sleep, because a lot of it is about maintaining our perspective and a positive outlook, and that's based on having enough good sleep. So I've written down some tips on this slide. For those of you that love a nap, the research says no more than 20-minute naps during the day. Avoid screen time. I keep saying this. Don't use your bed as a workspace. The reason for that is if you do, your brain starts to associate your bed with work rather than with sleep. And we want your brain to associate bed with sleep. Some other things that are helpful is if you go to bed at the same time every night. Ideally, avoid exercise before bed, so do it in the first half of the day. Really obvious things like limiting your intake of alcohol, caffeine and nicotine. There's also an idea it's called the 20-minute rule. So as you probably know, sleep goes in waves. So you might find that you've been awake for 20 minutes and you haven't been able to get back to sleep. Well, the next wave's not going to come until the hour. So rather than getting caught up in a frustration cycle, what the research suggests is that you do something else. So you might read, you might listen to a mindfulness app, something like that. Or you might have a notepad by your bed where you can write down things that might be worrying you. So this idea of using mindfulness can be really helpful in switching off that stress response that, you know, I can't get to sleep. What if I can't get to sleep? I'll be wrecked tomorrow. If I'm wrecked tomorrow, I won't be able to perform. I might lose my job, and that's how it goes on and on. So rather than doing that and having that negative rumination and self-talk, Mindfulness can have us switching from the negative internal dialogue to things like this. If you don't want to read a book and you don't want to do an app, you can just say things like, I'm just feeling the sheets. I can feel the weight of my body on the bed. I can feel my head on the pillow. Things like that. This can draw the energy and attention away from the stress response. And then as the next wave of sleep comes, you should be able to get to sleep. Now, if you are struggling, it's really important to seek support. Tell yourself it's okay at the moment to feel overwhelmed or stressed, particularly by the news at the moment. Think about and rely on your support networks. You can also acknowledge your feelings of distress and acknowledge that it's okay to ask for help. Evidence says that if you seek professional help early, you will have a better outcome. Now, for some, recognising that you are struggling is the first step. For some, this may manifest as obvious symptoms of anxiety, panic attacks, symptoms of depression, or things like obsessive compulsive disorder. For others, it may be more subtle. It might just be a sense of not quite coping, or feeling low in energy, or just even not feeling yourself. So I would encourage you to see your GP as a first port of call. If you don't have a good GP, ask around, find a good GP. And at the moment, you can see your GP very safely through telehealth. So if one of the things you're worried about is COVID-19, you can still get support for your mental health through your GP. I've also listed some other apps and other resources that I find are really helpful with students. Smiling Mind and Headspace, there were 100 different meditation apps, and they were all assessed in research. And the two that came out on top were Smiling Mind, which is an Australian app and it's free, and Headspace UK. I think it's free initially and then you do have to pay for it. So, I strongly encourage you to have a look at those if they are something that you think would be helpful. Monash Uni is also running a really helpful mindfulness-based course. It's free. You can sign up and do it. It's got amazing professors running it. And again, as I say, that's free. And I've also put some other suggested helpline numbers and things there for you. So what I thought we would do is finish with a final meditation. But I was going to just get you to think about a couple of points before we do that. This idea of self-compassion. So realise that this is a difficult period and it will end, and you need to give yourself time to recover. If it's helpful for you, use mindfulness. It's about trying to be in the present moment. It's about experiencing your emotions without being overwhelmed by them. And we know that learning to sit with our strong emotions at this time can be hard, but it can help us to process and resolve the anxiety caused by things we feel are essentially out of control. So it's not about changing our emotions, but rather we are changing our relationship with our emotions. Mindfulness can also help us switch off the stress response and this idea of ongoing negative rumination, particularly at night. Last year, I think there were 1,500 studies on the benefits of mindfulness, and they tell us it makes you happier, it makes you calmer, your relationships are better, and you are more productive. So I want you to remember that you can notice your anxiety, you can let yourself feel it, and you can give yourself some compassion And you can even do something as simple as just taking a great big deep breath. A lot of people that I've been speaking to at the moment have said to me they didn't realise this, and maybe this is something that's going on with you, that when they're asked to do that, they realise they've actually been holding their breath and holding their breath for a really long time over this period. So I thought we would do a mindfulness exercise together. I think we'll do one that goes for about 5 minutes, and then that way we've still got some time for questions if there are any questions people would like. And this is a mindfulness we do at Monash University, so credit to them for this one. Okay. So this practice is called the body scan, and it will run for approximately 5 minutes. I want you just to start by sitting comfortably in a chair or in the chair and allowing your back to be lengthened, straight but not tense. If it's helpful for you, you can close your eyes or you can just lower your eyes. I want you to embody a sense of relaxation and alertness at the same time. Just allowing the chair to support you, to hold your weight, and just letting go of any excess tension in the body. Any muscular activation that doesn't need to be there. And then bringing your awareness to your feet. Just noticing the soles of your feet making contact with the floor. Tuning into any sensations you notice there. And noticing the rest of the feet. Notice your toes. Notice your heels. Tuning into your ankles and the lower legs. Becoming aware of your shins and your calves. Just feeling your knees and your upper legs. And just holding both feet and both legs in awareness. And letting go of any tension that you find there. And then moving your attention to your hands. Becoming aware of the palms and the backs of your hands. The thumbs and fingers. And also noticing both of the arms. Simply letting go of any tension that you find there. And then noticing all the different sensations showing up in your arms and hands right now. Perhaps noticing how, as you do this, your attention comes into the present moment. And then at some point later, you may find your attention has wandered off into thinking or listening or somewhere else. And as soon as you've noticed your attention has wandered away, just simply bringing it back, escorting it gently back into the body, back to the arms and hands. And just doing this as many times as you need. Bring your awareness now to your stomach and your chest. Allowing your body to breathe naturally as it does when you're not paying any attention to it. And just noticing what it feels like to do that. Noticing your back and then noticing your shoulders and your neck. If you're holding any tension in your shoulders or your neck, try and imagine it as being like ice. And then it's melting and it's turning into water. And then that water turns into steam. And see if that helps you letting go of any tension that you find, particularly in your neck and shoulders. Letting go of any reactions to any of the sensations that are showing up in this part of your body. And then noticing your face, releasing any tension in the jaw, any tension in your eyes or your forehead. Letting go of any thoughts or distractions and coming back each time to the body. And then becoming aware of the body as a whole, sitting in the chair, letting go of any tension that's crept back in. And then noticing what it feels like to just sit and breathe. And that's all you have to do. And then when you're ready, allowing your eyes to gently open. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And I really wanted you to take this idea away with you about remembering to look for the positives, look for the silver linings at this time, and remember to breathe and be kind to yourself. So Jackie, if you've got any questions, please let me know.
Thanks, Andrea. We've got 2 questions about the slides. One from Maria and one from Shelja. Sorry if my pronunciation's wrong. At the end of the session, probably in the next few days, we'll send you a copy of this recording, which will have Andrea's slides. So a recording of the webinar. So yes, you will receive them. So I can dismiss that. So there's one that's quite complex, and perhaps part of it isn't necessarily on the topic. So we'll have to see about how we go, but bear with me. With this pandemic, several factors have impacted me at once. My 15-year-old daughter has come to live with me and I have less work. Social media is where my anxieties have arisen through watching videos with disturbing content. One such video is about Senator Hefferman's committee speech exposing paedophilic corruption in the judiciary, protecting pedophiles from investigation, etc. This hasn't been addressed as the Governor-General felt it would lead to a lack of confidence in the judiciary. How do we suggest one continues in the process of becoming involved in an industry one knows to be corrupt at the highest level?
I think that we have to look at these sorts of situations and think about what it is that we might be able to do to change this sort of culture. And if you're not part of it, your voice isn't going to be heard. So I know this sounds like a very big and grand idea, but I would be encouraging you even more so, if you're concerned about that sort of thing, to be involved in it so that you can be an advocate for change. You can be involved in changing these sorts of things. And I don't think, if you're in the process of doing your law degree, I don't think that the way things are at the moment, that these sorts of positions are out of reach for people getting through their law degrees at the moment. So that is one suggestion I would have. If you're particularly worried about a 15-year-old, my experience in dealing with these sorts of issues is that you don't want to shy away from them. You want her to, or him or her, to have the skills necessary to be able to deal with these sorts of situations. So it is having frank discussions at an age appropriate level with him or her. It's also about you being vigilant about who he or she spends time with. But if they are somewhere that they feel uncomfortable, that they have that strength of relationship with you where they can ring you and, you have a code word, you have a system in place, and they say the code word, and that means 3 o'clock in the morning I'll go and pick you up. I don't know if that's fully answering your question, but that off the top of my head is my suggestion for you. There are also some amazing groups that do work in this regard for adolescents. Body Safety Australia is a fantastic organisation. So if that's helpful for you, please have a look at their resources. They've got amazing resources on their website.
Thank you. And there's been a lot of thank yous, so well done, Andrea. Fabulous.
No, I hope everyone, I really wanted to help you. So I hope everyone comes out of lunchtime feeling a bit calmer. That's my aim. Yeah.
Are there any more resources, tips about avoiding comparing yourself to others?
My main one is get off social media.
Yeah.
There is so much research that says it can have a really negative effect. We know that people don't post pictures of themselves in crisis. We know people post pictures of themselves on holidays in Greece. So even though we know it on that level, it can be really hard when you're looking at it to not feel envious or jealous or whatever it is. So that's one of my big messages I'm sure you've all got from from listening to this presentation. Others, I will think about that, and I will try and add something into the slides about that, because it's a really, really important thing. I think a lot of problems with adolescents and with older people is to do with people's self-esteem. And if you have a really good sense of self-esteem and self-worth and who you are, then those sorts of things don't affect you so much. So I will have a think about that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, sorry.
What suggestions do you have for maintaining focus and productivity during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly with so many distractions at the moment?
Yeah, so I would suggest that you turn off any notifications and things on your phone. You can use apps to do that. You probably know about these things like there's one called Forest, there's one called Cold Turkey. You can put those apps on. You can't get back on your phone or your social media or whatever, so that you can have an uninterrupted session. We talk a lot about the research into procrastination. So what do you do if you're procrastinating? And the advice is you set a timer for 10 minutes and you just start. So if you've got a task or an assignment that you have to do for whatever course it is, you sit down, clean desk, set your timer, you just start. After 10 minutes, almost always you will be happy to continue a little bit longer. And once you've started, it becomes so much easier to continue. So that's another thing. So yeah, notifications off. If you're procrastinating, just start. And if you really are struggling to concentrate, keep that idea of self-compassion in mind. Keep that idea of your best friend. If your best friend rang you up and said, I've got this assignment due, I can't concentrate, you wouldn't be yelling at them, you wouldn't be berating them, you would be, with compassion saying, how can I help you? What do you need to do? So you might form a study group. You might get other people with you and brainstorm ideas in an attempt to try and break that circuit. But also just be really kind to yourself. It's hard. It's hard to concentrate. Anxiety, it saps your attention.
Mm.
Yeah.
The last question I think we've got, Andrea, is there might be another one. You mentioned the flight or fight in the snake example. I think of the worst case in order to prepare myself mentally and emotionally for that event occurring. Do you think that in the snake example, the emotional and mental impact would be worse if in fact it turned out to be a snake and he hadn't been cautious?
I'm going to start with the beginning of that question, which is about preparing for the worst case scenario and whether that's your best approach at the moment. I would challenge you to, keep up all your social distancing and social hygiene standards, but think perhaps that question I was putting to you, am I okay right now? And even in that snake situation, if you are asking yourself that question, am I okay right now? And the snake's there, yes, right this very second I am. And that enables your brain to be able to use this front part of your brain, which is your executive function, which is your thinking and planning. And it frees you up to be able to say, okay, I'm in this difficult situation. Now I'm going to think and plan how to get out of it. So that's what I would be urging you to think about. Not the most negative scenario, but if you are in the most negative scenario that actually is in front of you, what can I do right now? Take 3 deep breaths and take a step back, or whatever it is. I don't know if that answers that, but I hope that's helpful.
Mm.
It's often about reframing things. It's often about reframing how we look at things. Instead of saying, I'm totally overwhelmed, I've got too much to do, you can reframe it and you can say, okay, I've got a list. I'm going to start with the first thing on my list. I'm going to get that done, and then I'm going to get the second thing on my list done. So that's a way of reframing it so that you're not so anxious.
Mm.
Yep.
We've got 2 more. Do we have time? Are you happy to
Yeah, I'm happy to go as long as you need to go.
How can we be taken seriously by our peers if we have other qualifications, such as a yoga teacher? There seems to be a trend where people have skills that could be beneficial at the moment, but the trend is towards psychologists and above only providing mindfulness at the moment.
That's a really tricky one, isn't it? And that's a real shame that that's been your experience to whoever's been posing the question. I love yoga. I think yoga is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I guess it is, it would be depending, I suppose, on the people that you are with. I think if you can give them evidence-based research on why yoga is good for you, if they're the type of people that require evidence-based research, and there is a lot of evidence-based research on it, that might be helpful. But what I find, and when I'm teaching wellbeing, there are just people that are not interested. They don't want to learn about it. It's not something that's ever going to feature in their life, and that's about their choice. I would be trying to think about yourself being in a circle of people that supports the sorts of things that you believe in, that are supportive of your very important career as a yoga teacher. And, there's a lovely, it's an old circle of friendship. You have a circle and you draw it in the sand, and only the people that you really want to be in your circle, that are nurturing and supportive of you, you allow in that circle at this time. Might be a really helpful thing to do. And then the people that say no, I would just be limiting my contact with them. Even if you produced evidence, they might not be the sort of people would ever do that. But I know that it's certainly something that is very well respected and very well researched. And I really hope you don't feel that that's how everybody feels. Yeah.
And I think that is even evidenced at the College of Law. I mean, during this period, we've introduced yoga I think there's 4 different sessions a week, all different times of the day. So it might suit people for 6 a.m, not me, but for those interested at 6 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that perhaps answers, there's another question about, is there a cultural shift for organisations and companies to incorporate healthy workplace, e.g. yoga, meditation, lunch exercise? I think there is definitely a huge shift. And I think that there was even a huge shift prior to COVID-19. It seems even more so now with COVID-19. But I think that a lot of what I consider perhaps more contemporary employers already embrace things like that, whether it be yoga or meditation or walking. Some have walking meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think the really good leaders understand that they're dealing with real people, and that real people have real emotions. And so a really good leader is going to look at these things now, even more so. And I think we will see a change in the workplace, and hopefully there will be access to more well-being type things. This isn't just suddenly, going to go away next week. And I think that's why even the government has last week announced, there's going to be a huge amount of funding for essentially mental health, but well-being as well. So I would be, I know it's hard, people aren't trying to change jobs at the moment, but in all the different law firms and government legal agencies, there are different cultures. So I would be thinking about my values, thinking about, I want to eventually, when the job market is better, I want to be in a culture that embraces these sorts of things. And then I would be setting some goals to think about how I could eventually end up in that sort of place. That's what I would be doing. Yeah.
We keep getting more.
That's all right.
How do you suggest one overcomes feelings of guilt about worrying about things when people are in much worse situations other than oneself?
Yeah. Guilt is a really unproductive emotion, and I will just say that straight. It's okay to feel it, but don't get into that. It's about that comparison idea. Don't get into the comparison idea that just because you're not on a respirator in hospital, that doesn't mean you're being affected. Everybody reacts to things in different ways, and what you're feeling is your real feelings. And so it's okay to feel them, and you don't have to feel guilty about them. And if you are worried, find someone that you can talk to about them that's going to be supportive and non-judgmental. But however you're reacting at the moment is okay. And that's okay. You don't have to have lost your job. You don't have to have, been kicked out of your rental property to be suffering. It's okay to feel anxious, and it's okay to feel, not quite yourself at the moment.
Okay, last one, I think. I find when I'm working or studying, once I get stuck on something, because it is too hard, then I'll procrastinate and put it off. Do you have advice for how to deal with the subconscious negative emotions that are associated with the task that is too hard?
Yeah. So if you've hit that point where you think it's too hard, that's when I'd probably take a break, and I would get out in nature. I would go for a mindful walk, or even if you're in an apartment, I would stand on the balcony, stick my head out the window, just change the processes that are going on in your brain. You could then come back. Some students find it helpful to listen to sort of little mini motivational YouTube things, but don't get caught in the cycle of just going on to the next one and the next one, and 3 hours later you're still listening to motivational things. Set a time that you're going to do that. So some people find that that's helpful. Or, you could come back from your break, just write down dot points, and then come back, dot points that might be helpful, and then come back to it at a later point in time. And again, coming back to this idea of reframing it. So it's this idea that, when you're at school, when I was at school, they had streams. So there were people that were good at maths and there were people that were not good at maths. And if you got put in the not good at maths, that was your mindset, I'm not good at maths. So you wouldn't try. So what I want you to do is think about reframing it so that instead of thinking this question is too hard, how could you reframe that? Okay, I'm going to break this question down into bite-sized chunks. And on Monday morning, I'm going to do chunk 1. And on Monday afternoon at 3, I'm going to do chunk 2. And see if you can do it in that way. If that's still really hard, again, this idea of doing it in a group, asking each other, because somebody might find that bit really easy, but another bit really hard. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Andrea. I think we've covered all of it. Thank you so much for your time today. A lot of the conversation in the chat was thanking you, and especially for all the helpful tips. So thank you very much for your time.
No, it was really a pleasure, and I really want everybody to go away and remember to breathe and remember to be really kind to yourselves. So yes, that's my final message to you. Okay.
Great.
And thank you very much, Jackie.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.